Welcome, everyone. So Julie and I are excited to talk with you today about results from our latest HR technology survey. It's ISG's 2021 Trends in HR Technology and Service Delivery. So to help our clients really understand, where is the market headed, we surveyed 260 companies around the world and really representing a cross-section of industries and geographic regions, ranging in size from companies with 5,000 employees at the low end to over 50,000 at the high end. And we're happy to be here today to share our findings. So I'll kick us off and talk about the HR tech market and the key findings there. And then Julie will take over and share results on the HR tech and HR service delivery side. And then, as Wendy said, we will open it up for questions at the end, but feel free to ask those as we go along. And as we said, we will try to save kind of 8 to 10 minutes or so to do that. So, to get started, as we looked at this year's results, what we found was a big jump in terms of organizations that are using HR SaaS. So what we found is 46% of organizations here describe themselves as using HR SaaS or a hybrid SaaS solution as their primary HR technology model. So this was a big jump from our prior survey. So when we did this in 2019, it was showing around 20% of organizations showing SaaS as their primary model. So here, saw a big movement over the last, 2 years. The remaining 54% you'll see here on this slide represent really on-prem hosted or internally developed solutions. But, the dynamic that we saw really take place from the prior survey, we had seen organizations kind of struggle with how do we get to SaaS as quickly as we wanted, the time to plan and get approvals for business case and make changes to the operating model or come together to harmonize processes. All of these things were really stalling organizations. And there was a challenge often for these small kind of stretched HR teams. And so this year's result, shows a very different picture where we see organizations now actually moving faster than what they predicted. And as we looked ahead here to 2023 and kind of the forward-looking view, the percentage of organizations expecting, to move to SaaS, climbs even higher to 57%. So clear momentum in the market and, very much a message of strong growth in the HR cloud. When we look at why, what's driving this acceleration to the cloud, we see that improving the user experience was really the top outcome, that organizations are expecting as they shift to HR SaaS. So, coming out of, the pandemic, in particular, organizations are particularly focused on, how do we better engage our employees? How do we support a virtual workforce, improve productivity? Enable a more agile HR model. And so all of these elements, HR SaaS is seen as a really critical strategy to be able to achieve, these outcomes. And certainly in the market, when we look at the leading providers and where they're investing, the focus on user experience. So things like, ease of use, mobile chat, self-service, all areas really are significant investments by these HCM platforms. And those are areas that really represent critical components around that optimal user experience that organizations are really, driving to create for their employees. In addition to improving user experience, we see that there's some other key drivers, here as well. So you'll see some of the area around reducing dependency on IT, reducing HR admin cost, improving integration of some of the data and applications. Those were also highly rated outcomes in the move to SaaS. And interestingly, we did see, the results did vary based on our survey participants' roles. So, primary stakeholders in our survey were HR, IT, and shared services. The HR stakeholders, they really prioritize that employee experience, employee engagement, kind of reduced dependency on IT as their primary outcomes. When we looked at IT, interestingly enough, they were focused on reducing HR costs. And then for shared services, they were really focused on how do we improve the integration of data and applications. So, kind of given the operational challenges and disparate systems and a lot of manual activities, probably, not unsurprising there that really wanting to make sure that operations run much more smoothly and efficiently. A great outcome we found in this year's survey was that there was a huge jump in companies really being able to realize measurable business value. So this too was an area, in our prior survey, we found a big gap between the investments that organizations were making and their ability to achieve business results. In our prior survey, it showed 41% had positively responded that they were achieving business value, which was a bit alarming given, the organizations are making these big investments in the solutions and yet weren't able, to really capture or articulate some clear business value. This year's results, though, tell a much different story. So here, you see 64% said they achieved measurable business value by adopting SaaS. So, this is 23 percentage points higher than the prior one and more than a 50%, increase in the numbers. So great results here. The biggest metrics that organizations cited was productivity. That was a top metric for about a third of the respondents. Other metrics that organizations cited were around user satisfaction, engagement, quicker access to data, better data management, better security, as well as reduced cost. Lots of great results being seen here. When we look at cost, not only, we found, was this business value, such a great story, but really in terms of the cost savings, we found more than 60% of organizations had achieved 10 to 30% or more savings across both IT and HR in their move to SaaS. So you can see, really the vast majority of organizations are realizing, at least 10% or more in terms of their shift. And just 10% of organizations said they either spent more or were not able to achieve HR cost savings here. So encouraging results here. I think, this year, of course, coming out of 2020, of course, the COVID pandemic had a huge impact on the way we all work and the priorities of HR. And so, we saw survey respondents, they shifted their priorities and they prioritized, work from home tools and technologies. We saw training and upskilling employees become more critical. Employee wellness became an important priority. How to monitor kind of performance, remotely and make sure that employees stay engaged. All of those things became, important priorities for HR. And so, what we saw was that organizations that had invested in digital HR technologies, they were able to leverage these tools to make sure that they could react and really manage through, these challenging times. So specifically, organizations, cited real value with the new technology to enable better, business data-driven decisions, to be able to help better connect their teams, to support HR processes virtually, to better keep a pulse on engagement, and really manage all of the changing kind of policies, compliance that was required. So overall, we saw, these tools did position HR to accommodate some of these big changes that were driven by the pandemic with, certainly more agility and speed and just confidence than they otherwise would have. Moving forward, we asked what the level of work from home would be. And what we found was kind of 20 to 40%, still, they expect that level of work from home in 2022 and beyond. So, it does necessitate that there is a long-term work from home strategy, and that does mean investment in HR, technology tools and capability. What we did find, was a very strong correlation between a company's, ability to achieve those business results with its commitment to aligning to the service delivery model and optimizing the processes with the new HR platform. So in other words, what we found was, success was much more likely when an organization saw the move to SaaS as a true HR transformation. Here, this shows, in cases where organizations failed to achieve their clear business value, so that 36% that, we cited earlier, the reasons really revolved around, the failure to change their HR service delivery model, failure to change their HR business processes, or gaps in expectations in the technology. But, from the chart here, really almost, 2/3 of the gaps in meeting business value were related to factors outside of the technology itself. So to us, it sent a very clear message that, organizations that approach the HCM implementation as a true transformation, we're certainly much more likely to achieve, their business goals. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie, and she'll share more in terms of some of the HR service delivery findings.
Great. Thanks very much, Stacey. That's such a great segue into the service delivery side of the house and of this survey. So for many years running, our survey has tracked the prevalence of service delivery, whether it's done in-house, decentralized, that's the far left hand of the spectrum here, moving over to consolidated as shared services, outsourced, or a hybrid mix of outsourced and insourced. And while you can't see the results side by side that we published in 2019, we can and have been looking at that and are sharing what is a really unmistakable shift to outsourced and hybrid delivery models as some of the outcomes of our survey. In earlier years, you would see the internal delivery models kind of tip the scales to the majority usage, but in this year's survey, the tables have turned in a pretty big way. We're seeing the outsourced and hybrid delivery across all categories has now become kind of the 40 to 60% predominant model. You can also see the details here by function. And they've increased as well. And I just wanted to share a few highlights or draw your attention to a few things. In the green font on the right, we've tracked how much each individual category, functional category, has increased. And the results are pretty interesting. The core HR services that might include things like workforce admin, payroll, comp, ben admin, those had the most marked and undeniable increase in outsourcing, nearly 30% shift toward outsourced and hybrid outsourced models in all of these areas. And it's interesting that it does align with some of the same core HCM functions that are deployed first in the model, and that only 10% or less of organizations remain in kind of an internal decentralized delivery, a little bit higher in payroll where sometimes a different system is used, or it's hard to move away from legacy tools. So then I also, thought it was interesting when we turn to the talent critical functions, so especially recruiting and learning in the middle of the chart there. We do see outsourcing and hybrid prevalence has still jumped a pretty solid 20% on average. Messaging that the core has jumped the most, and then getting to those talent critical functions has also benefited from a very strong increase in outsourced and hybrid prevalence. The lowest increases actually surprised me a little bit. We're seeing in the tech heavy support areas. Those are at the top of this functional chart, and things like the HCM upgrades and configuration support, analytics and timekeeping, those areas, have kind of lagged in growth, although they've grown some themselves. So if we move on, something else we ask from year to year is HR's intent to utilize more or less of a particular delivery model. Here again, we're seeing 50% or more of all respondents expressing an intent to either begin or continue to use BPO and shared services. And that's despite the increases that were already observed in the prior slides. So, the movement between these two models appears to reflect, further expansion of scope to new functional areas, and, or the refinement to dial up or dial down scope, really to find your organization's sweet spot. I did notice, you may notice that 14% gray bar for stop utilization that shows up in the HR BPO space is larger than shared services and larger than we've seen it in the past. And I have kind of a personal read on that, that it might be related to how organizations do move to HR BPO. For business case reasons and to transform faster, the initial plunge into outsourcing usually errs on the side of more scope and services than less. That may not always be ideal, but it is pretty common. And then that tends to lead to a period of time when the dust settles and scope overreach might be returned to the retained organization. And so perhaps, maybe there's a little bit of that in that that increased gray bar that we see on the top in the top HR BPO section. Let's move along maybe to our next slide, which looks at how BPO is outsourced, or the reasons or rationale that people get in to this side of the service delivery model. And here we wanted to share with you just some slides about the motivation for outsourcing. And we focused in our survey around 3 levers facing HR buyers today. And the first being, HR as a part of the broader organizational move to BPO. I was a little surprised to see this dynamic surface more than half of the time. But I have to say that we do see that in some of the actions that our clients are taking and have been taking since COVID. At times it's been for, quick cost reduction measures or needing to make a dramatic change to match the dramatic times. But as we all kind of settle into life after COVID, there has been prolonged activity in kind of a combined look at HR and other back office services in the organization in the same breadth. The next 2 reasons that are most typically cited include underlying the reduction in cost, and here just 38% said, yes, that was definitely a primary motivator, and improving service delivery quality, which was 43% of organizations responded that was a primary motivator. And so I actually want to move quickly to the next slide, which breaks that down by employee size or organization size, because I found that incredibly interesting in the survey results. Here you'll see that the impact and motivation registered differently for different size organizations. So if you let your eyes go to the dark green patch at the bottom, which stretches 10,000 employee to 20,000 employee companies, these are the ones that are most likely to bundle HR with other back office services. The provider markets aren't always the same for HR and other back office areas, but at this company size, we really see folks seeking leverage, the same sort of leverage that in an internal delivery model looks at dedicated global business services strategies. And so, that's pretty understandable. That you boost kind of the impact of putting all the transactional activities together and look for as much leverage as possible. Let's see. So another thing I wanted to highlight before we go, until you hit the very large size employers, an outcome that transforms and advances service delivery generally outweighs the expected cost reduction. So, we especially hear new technology enablement like experience suites or automation and analytics as being the most highly sought after drivers of that enhanced quality. When folks are actually seeking to do their outsourcing and explore what the market can bear or what the market can offer, it's expressly looking for tools that are above and beyond, just the administrative services. It's looking for that transformational technology levers and some assistance and support to get there, not only for better services, but because of the expectation that that drives a better quality of service, that it drives a better experience, and that it becomes very tangible and as an advantage, and exactly what our consumers are expecting from our environment. Let's see, I think we did promise at the beginning that we were going to save a little bit of time and open it up and see if we had some folks that had some questions or wanted to ask anything about some of the survey results. And I'm just moving my screen around a little bit to see if we have anything that's come in through the Q&A or the
I
chat.
didn't. Yeah, this is Wendy. Thank you so much, Julie and Stacey. I don't see anything in the Q&A and chat right now, but we do have time if any of our participants have questions. So please feel free to use those features to send any questions in. And if not, we can always, if you think of something offline, we're more than, as I mentioned before, Stacey and Julie are more than happy to answer some questions offline as well.
Absolutely. Yes, I've flashed up here the contact information for both Julie and I. Happy to share more, as well as provide a link to the overall in-depth study that you can find as well on our website. So I guess, Wendy, we'll give it one more minute if there's any additional questions.
It looks like a question just came through. Oh, somebody just said, thank you for sharing the information. So that wasn't a question, but a nice comment that you received.
The survey report, by the way, is a hearty, like 25 pages, not only of these and other graphs, but with an awful lot of context put around it. So, you know, really very happy to share the details with anyone who's interested.
Right. And I was going to offer to, if you would, you can do it however you prefer, obviously, but I'm more than happy to share the link to the survey with all the attendees or point them to the survey on the ISG website, whichever works best, just to make sure everybody gets that information.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Well, we really appreciate everyone's time today. So thank you for listening, and happy to have any follow-up discussions and share additional findings. So thank you.
Thanks.
Sure. And yes, thank you so much, Stacey and Julie. And if any of the attendees would like to share their questions with me, I'm more than happy to forward them along. Or of course, please contact Julie and Stacey yourself. So thank you so much for sharing all this information today. And thanks to all our participants. We hope to see you on a future live stream. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.